Day 1234 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,031,000 military personnel losses. In fact, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the Asian Summit just mentioned that Russia has lost over 100,000 soldiers since January this year, and emphasized that this figure does not include injured, just KIA. And yet, it's still looking like a conservative estimate for this year, and where I'll go into a few more details on that topic in just a moment. Then as for hardware losses, 2 tanks, 7 APVs, and 23 artillery. Next to the territory of control stats, where Russia's land capture of Ukraine stands at a grand total of 18.87%, up 0.03% from this time last week, slightly above average for a week, but by no means any different from previous Russian summertime offensives, and still set on a pace to complete their objectives in Ukraine somewhere around the 22nd century, if only they had that long. Now to a quicker look at the map today, because it's day 1234, which has been a real problem due to my naming of so many temporary files on my computer as 1234... causing some incredibly unnecessary complications with file management today. But now to the map, where Ukrainian UAVs targeted key military assets in Moscow overnight. In Dubna, the Kronstadt facility, a hub for drone development, was struck, marking a repeat assault on this critical site. Simultaneously, the Lukavitsky aviation plant, responsible for assembling MiG-29 and MiG-35 fighter jets, also came under fire. Reports also indicated multiple explosions in the nearby Tver Oblast. But back to Moscow for a second, and for something we might consider an international airliner incident, where Russian air defenses nearly made headlines again for all of the wrong reasons after they fired on a civilian airliner traveling from the Belarusian capital of Minsk, apparently mistaking the jet for a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. The Russian Pantsir air defense system, already famous for its unparalleled performance, had, in this case, in a jittery show of air defense, reportedly unleashed 30mm cannon fire on the Aeroflot flight AFL 1845 as it approached a Moscow airport. The passenger plane suffered minor damage, but the crew managed to land safely. If this sounds familiar, it's because we've seen it before. Grozny last year, and MH17 before that. So unfortunately, it's shaping up to be quite the negative association between Russian air defenses and passenger planes, in another alarming sign of their military's astonishingly incompetent practices. Flights in Moscow were grounded, but only after the incident. Of course, you won't see this type of event in Ukraine because they're in a war. There are no passenger planes in the skies, and yet somehow Russia still remains too squeamish to even call it a war, never mind actually enforcing real safety standards. Then next on the map to Rostov, where drones were seen flying through Tagnarog of the Oblast, the region, and where directly east of here, as something burns strongly at the railway tracks in Bataysk. Then briefly on the map to Kursk, with reports on Ukrainian UAV groups that have launched a new raid onto the Russian territory. Breach in the rear. Kursk is currently under heavy drone assault, with Russian channels reporting a significant influx of Ukrainian drones in the region. Then to the main map, where Russian forces were shamelessly shelling regions including the outskirts of the city of Sumy, but also in Kharkiv, where a Russian drone attack occurred on a maternity home, a dental clinic, and an educational institution. No civilian casualties, and with the mums and babies safely evacuated from that maternity home. Next up, and to the main axis of activity today, with some further incremental expansions by the Russian forces in the southeast around Tolstoy and Mern, and on the Russian expectation that AFU elements positioned just beyond the Vovcha River on the east side are in less defendable positions. Also on the map, we saw some clear footage of Ukrainian FPVs on the hunt, bypassing the front door in this case, hopping through the window only to locate and occupy our ammunition cache target. Then also, Ukrainian drones are deploying PFM-1 Petal anti-personnel landmines onto Russian roads, targeting logistical and assault pathways. These pressure-activated devices, dropped at night, slipping through enemy net tunnels, are designed to disable vehicles by destroying tires, effectively hindering Russian mobility and operations. Then to a slightly similar situation as Ukraine is advancing drone-deployed camouflage improvised landmines. These cobblestone munitions blend seamlessly with their surroundings, making detection that much more difficult. Russian forces, one of them, stumbled upon such a disguise, revealing the innovative Ukrainian tactic aimed at enhancing battlefield stealth and effectiveness. Now to some news, but firstly, a heads up, as it's fair to suspect we're now back in Russian nuclear saber-rattling territory, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. But first up for news, President Trump is turning up the pressure on Moscow, telling NBC he's deeply disappointed with Russia's behavior and plans to make a major announcement about it on Monday. Trump also unveiled a fresh weapons deal. The US will sell arms directly to NATO, which will pay full price and then funnel those weapons straight to Ukraine. The new setup reportedly includes Patriots, but with Trump insisting NATO will handle all the distribution and cost. Nonetheless, it still looks like a win of an update for Ukraine. We've come a long way, baby. Well, came a long way, followed by a detour, then this. Now, sources say that the plan has already been run past Zelensky and UK PM Starmer, French President Macron, and other European leaders, signaling a coordinated front now. Plus, there's also reports coming out that the US has resumed supplying Ukraine with 155mm NATO gold standard artillery rounds and HIMARS GMLRS rockets too. And also, where reports indicate that the Trump administration is reported to be preparing a $300 million presidential drawdown authority, which are military aid packages from existing US stockpiles to support allies in emergencies without needing congressional approval. And with the figure of $300 million suspiciously close to previous sustainment packages from the US that Ukraine had received under the Biden administration, it would appear that the US-Ukraine relationship is getting some legs to it again. Then to Rome, to the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, where the format was expanded as, for the first time, representatives of the United States took part in the meeting, including retired Lieutenant General and US Special Envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, alongside Senators Graham and Blumenthal, and for an event comprising of a total of 32 participants, heads and representatives of states, governments, and international organizations, with the group intensifying its support for Ukraine amid the ongoing conflict. Now, while deploying peacekeepers in Ukraine is on hold, no surprises there, as at the current juncture, given such a deployment is part of a post-ceasefire outcome that's nowhere to be found right now, the coalition is boosting Ukraine's defensive capabilities with new air policing, Black Sea security, and training support, coordinated from their new Paris HQ. Above all attending members acknowledged that this is a war that can only be overcome through unity. Couldn't have said it better myself. Then to some Kremlin responses, a bit of a mixed bag here, because at first, Kremlin spokesperson and Putin bidet, Peskov, remarked that Moscow has no disagreements with the White House amid negotiations with Ukraine, adding that there is a genuine desire to resolve the issue through political and diplomatic means, and to do so as quickly as possible, but that the complexity of the matter does not allow for an immediate resolution. Not much to be said here, as the Kremlin is echoing statements of the past meaninglessly, repeatedly, time and time again. Meanwhile, and as somewhat of a contrast, the Kremlin looks to have let the dogs loose because Russia's top propagandist Syolovov is at it again, threatening to unleash a radioactive tsunami, this time on the States, and to turn it into the Stalin stray, as he called it. Now, as with that pre-warning, we'll see a lot more of this. The nuclear threats, In fact, we've seen a lot of it in the past. So much so, in fact, that it lost all credibility, and only second in credibility lost to their very own dilapidated nuclear program, which experienced multiple failed intercontinental ballistic missile tests, 4 in a row, actually. All of the most recent ones. Oh, and also, Syelovov has also now threatened that Russian soldiers will march into Berlin again and will not leave. Only this time, he says, there will be a nuclear wasteland instead of a city, which means Russia would be sending their own soldiers to occupy a nuclear wasteland of a city of Berlin. Okay then. It's all huff and puff. Nonsensical huff and puff. Then to some hardware news. US company Misc Industries has announced the development of the Viper, a vertical takeoff interceptor kamikaze drone inspired by lessons learned from the Ukraine war. Few technical specifications have been disclosed, but the drone features a maximum flight range of 290 kilometers, about 180 miles, carries a 22-pound warhead, and can reach supersonic speeds. With a unit price reportedly under $100,000, it utilizes AI for navigation and has multi-band radio frequency targeting, which allows systems to detect, track, and engage targets by using multiple radio frequencies, enhancing precision and resistance to jamming. And you know, they call it an interceptor, but with range and speed like that, it actually sounds a lot more like an extended range hybrid missile drone. So it's either being given a much more diplomatic name, or given that it's used for aerial interception, it suggests it might be designed for intercepting military jets or helicopters as opposed to Shahed attack drones. Then to belt out a little bit more of the hardware news, the Czech company Excalibur Army has opened an office in Ukraine aimed to localize and boost ammunition production for Ukrainian use. Also in some hardware news, France will resume production of the Scalp cruise missile for the first time in 15 years. The Scalp is essentially a joint venture weapon developed collaboratively by the United Kingdom and France, better known by its nearly identical UK Storm Shadow variant, which has been a very successful tool for the Ukrainian military. Also for hardware news, in a significant boost to Ukraine's air defenses, the UK has agreed to supply over 5,000 Thales manufactured surface-to-air missiles. This deal, part of a $3.4 billion loan, approximately a £2.5 billion loan, features a long repayment term of 19 years, enhancing Ukraine's ability to counter aerial threats effectively. Now to a Russian military mobilization blunder segment, and where, despite Kremlin boastings, Russia's military is hemorrhaging troops and tossing most straight into assault units. Take Russian ex-police officer Mark Sadikov, who says his own commanders ordered him to die at the front in Ukraine, leading him to record his own farewell video for his family. Demoted after a dispute, he was dumped in a Donetsk unit, notorious for brutal treatment, and sent there despite having a serious leg injury. Sadikov claims his exit is blocked, no one will help, and his death is being arranged by top officers. He requests intervention in the video, but even he admits that if the video surfaces, he's likely already dead or missing. And then following on from that, independent Russian online news outlet Verstka has also reported on the matter from additional frontline Russian soldiers, adding that nothing's really changed for Russia's stormtroopers. They're still sent into the riskiest of jobs at the front, and that their chances of lasting long are nil. It was also said that Russian troops expressed the term experienced stormtrooper as a joke among them, as nobody has been known to survive any decent length of time in the Russian Storm Z assaults to earn such a title. One soldier was forced to pay a commander 500,000 rubles for drone money, but the gear never materialized. It was also a forced bribe, but it didn't matter because later on he was then sent to the front. Now to wash all of that off with something a little bit lighter, so here we have it with a goat rescued from the war zone by members of the Ukrainian army found at a nearby frontline village, and not coming from the Russian army. I say that because Russia uses donkeys for logistics, but not goats, as they are not practical pack animals, too small for transport, they are easily panicked, and hard to control en masse. And so looking back into the past, it doesn't explain why the Chechen Kadyrovite horses have previously been spotted herding field goats into their trenches. But those Kadyrov goat jokes do come from somewhere. Then to round off the video with a slightly humorous 5-second funny, as Russia's sole remaining heavy aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, may finally get the boot, as the Russian Defense Ministry now admits they lack the funds, technical expertise, and industrial capability needed for its restoration. The carrier has done the rounds with countless corrupt oligarch military contractors, winning the tender for maintenance and a lot more than that, as it hasn't been in active service for years. Decades of patchwork fixes, catastrophic breakdowns, and a shortage of modern shipbuilding technology have left the carrier so unsalvageable and seemingly constantly on fire, making it nothing more than a money pit of a stationary smokescreen. So it's a sad day for Russians who still want to call Russia a superpower without a carrier to back up that claim. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!